Yeah.
Namaste, everyone. Nice to see everyone here. We are going to talk about luxury and misery today as a part of our Sunday Shodh with Sattva series. A lot of our friends keep asking questions, various questions on which they ask me to express my opinion. When I express my opinion, it's not to critique anybody. It's not with the expectation that you will agree with me. I simply express my opinion as I feel it and as I have experienced. So I try to experience things before I talk about them. So whatever I talk about is basically my experience. Therefore, I don't prepare for my lectures. Whatever I'm inspired to speak on a particular day at a particular time, depending upon what questions are being asked, I try to be most sincere to the thought and try to take my individuality or ego out of it. That's why only the subject gets spoken of. Vikram Pattarkin is not speaking. That's how these lectures happen. And I'm grateful my elder brother, Dr. Kamal Kanji Goyal, is here with me. He participates in these discussions. He also adds his own points of view to what I'm saying, which enriches the discussion. So, more than me teaching anybody, I learn from these discussions myself and I'm greatly benefited by them. So, I appreciate everybody coming here and participating in these discussions. We do these discussions as a part of the Sattva program. Sattva is a program where we share our experience of diet purification to mind purification to self realization. The ultimate goal of life is to realize who we are. We may achieve whatever we want to do in life. We run after so many things and we achieve many of them also. It's not that we don't achieve them, but we don't find them fulfilling, ultimately fulfilling. Once we fulfill one objective or one goal, then another objective comes up in front of us. So trying to fulfill these objectives becomes our only purpose of life. As long as the objective happens to be something I consider to be other than myself. In Sanskrit, the term for that is called anatma. As long as I am pursuing something that I consider to be anatma, then that pursuit may be fulfilling for some time and may provide me some temporary happiness, but it will not provide me or it cannot provide me complete fulfillment. That has been our experience all our life. If we analyze our own experience, we will realize that we have tried to pursue all kinds of goals. But in spite of achieving many of those goals, we don't feel fulfilled. What is the reason? If we deeply think about this, then we will also get the answer for the questions that are being asked today. So today the question is, why is there so much misery all around? Why is there so much misery all around is a very subjective question. Okay, it's not an objective question. What may be misery for me could be opportunity for somebody else, isn't it? So let us take the example of this corona pandemic. The current situation of the corona pandemic is and can be a misery for many. Those who are afflicted by it, those who have the corona infection, those who have had to go to the hospital, and those who have unfortunately passed away, or those whose family members are sick and they have passed away. So for them, the corona pandemic is misery. About that, there is no doubt. And our hearts go out to such people, isn't it? Fortunately, we have not been afflicted by it. Our immediate family has not been afflicted by it. So we are fortunate. We should consider ourselves to be fortunate. But look at the person who is in the business of manufacturing personal protective equipment, masks, or even some kind of vaccine. So if I happen to be a pharma executive, then the pandemic, the same situation, is an opportunity. So therefore, the situation itself is not miserable. The situation is the way it is. Whether I feel miserable or not depends upon my perspective, depends upon where I am. Okay. I'll take another example. Let's look at heat. So right now, it is winter outside. Right now, where I am, it is snowing outside as we speak. Okay. So heat will feel good. In fact, I'm wearing a sweater. I'm wearing three layers. I have an undershirt, then I have a red shirt, and then I have a white sweater. So I'm feeling warm. There is heat in the house. So every now and then, when the temperature drops, then the heating system will kick on and the heat feels good. Okay. The same heat in the summer is bothersome. So heat by itself is not miserable. Heat is miserable in the summer because I happen to find myself in a hot season. But the heat can be very pleasing and soothing and desirable during the winter because I find myself in the cold situation, isn't it? So, therefore, why is there misery around? There is not misery around, there is misery within me. Okay. So, the situation is miserable depending upon how I look at it and how I myself identify with it. Now, if I do not identify myself with the situation at all, okay, I take the situation or I take any situation the way it comes without any specific expectation, then the situation will be as it is, but I will not be miserable. I will do something to change the situation. So, in the winter, can I do anything about the snow outside? Or can I do anything about the cold outside? I cannot. Then what should I do? I should keep myself warm. In fact, in our yoga class, we teach a technique called Ujjayi Pranayam. Ujjayi. That Ujjayi Pranayam can keep the body warm. So, if we learn how to do that, if we do it deliberately, then it can provide us relief. In fact, a lot of yogis in the Himalayas, they live comfortably during the winter also. Some of them may not wear 2 or 3 layers the way I do. How do they do that? They have learned how to keep their bodies in equilibrium even if the temperature is below freezing. About 6 months ago, a video was viral on WhatsApp. I received it from 3 or 4 different people where a yogi who is wearing nothing more than a loincloth, langoti, completely undressed, okay, walking on the snow along with his dog. Dog, we can understand, the dog is probably used to the cold weather, but the yogi is also in that snow without any footwear, bare feet, and only wearing a loincloth in the dead of the winter. It is possible. All right. So there are techniques in which yogis can keep their bodies warm and so on. I'm not a yogi. You can see I'm wearing 3 layers, even though I'm sitting inside a centrally heated house. Okay. So I don't even desire that kind of siddhi, that kind of power, that kind of yogic power. I'm not interested in, because those who are interested, they can pursue. We all pursue what we like, right? So luxury and misery. We talked about misery so far. Misery happens to be a condition of the mind. Okay, misery is not an external situation. External situation is the way it is. but I make it miserable or joyful, depending upon where I am standing, depending upon my perspective. Now let's talk about what is luxury. See, luxury means having a number of choices. Having a number of choices. Whether we know it, whether we believe it, whether we agree with it, whether we like it or not, we are natural beings. Okay? We are a product of this nature. We are a product of nature. So, according to nature, to sustain this, it requires so much sustenance every day. And that sustenance is determined by nature, not by us. All right. So, if everything we need to sustain ourselves is available and we do not desire anything more than that, then we will be living in luxury all the time. Okay. I think Socrates was the one who said that contentment is natural wealth and luxury is artificial poverty. Think. Contentment is natural wealth and luxury is artificial poverty. So, the example I like to give to people always is if you want to swim, then to comfortably swim, the water has to be about 6 feet deep. If it is less than 6 feet deep, or if it is only 4 feet deep, then you will not be able to swim very comfortably, because when you want to swim, then your feet will touch the floor of the pool, right? But if it is 6 feet deep, then, for me at least, I am 5'8", so I will be completely drowned before my feet will touch the floor. So for me to swim comfortably, 6 feet deep water is very good. That will be very nice. All right. Guess what? Even if the water happens to be 600 feet deep, I will need only 6 feet deep water to swim, isn't it? So 6 feet deep water is a necessity, and 594 feet beyond that is called luxury. When I sit down to eat, I can eat only so much. All right. Even if I have so much, I can only eat so much. So having this much and desiring no more is natural wealth. But having this much and desiring that much is artificial poverty. So luxury is artificial poverty, and contentment, if I have so much on my plate and I want only that much, I don't want any more than that, that is called natural wealth. If we live in this manner, then we will understand the difference between luxury and misery from within us. I won't have to come and tell you what that means. To understand this from within, the first rule I always tell people to follow, which I have followed myself, because all of these things came into my understanding intuitively after I consistently followed that rule. Okay. So the rule we always break is we eat more than necessary. All right. The reason we eat most of the time is because food is available, and food is available very easily. For the last, I would say, 20, 30, 40 years, we have not really had to struggle for food. Most of us. In fact, I would say all of us who are here at this webinar do not have to really struggle for food. In fact, we have a lot of choices of our own food, whatever we can eat. That choice is luxury. But from that, what to choose, how much, and when, that wisdom most of us don't have. Even I didn't have. So the only reason to eat was food is available. That is not a good reason to eat at all. Then I eat because somebody is insisting, ye khai lo. That is not a good reason either. Okay. Sometimes I feel tempted. I see something which I really like. Let's say I'm Maharashtrian, so puran poli. and then I feel like eating it. Not a good reason. The only good reason, in engineering, we always used to study, or even in mathematics, they say that necessary and sufficient condition, the necessary and sufficient condition for eating is I'm hungry. Only when my body is giving me a signal that I'm hungry, then I should eat. That should be the only time I should eat. If I'm not hungry, I should not eat. If I follow this one rule, then mind becomes clearer after that. So initially, I may continue to eat what I'm eating, whatever I like to eat, whatever I'm traditionally eating, whatever my family tradition is. If I happen to be in Maharashtra, I eat dal, chawal, sabzi, roti. If I'm in Punjab, maybe I eat rajma and paneer and chole and all those things. If I'm in southern India, then I eat idli, sambar, dosha, whatever. The only condition in which I should eat this is I'm hungry. Once I do that, then what is suitable for me, what should I eat, what will make me feel good, that will appear within me intuitively. Then nobody else will have to tell me. So we suggest to people that you do this and then you try to substitute cooked food with natural food. Try to increase the percentage of natural food. Once we do that, then that food gets absorbed in our system properly. It purifies our system, it detoxifies our system, and it also detoxifies our mind. Once that happens, then what we should do thereafter starts becoming clearer and clearer and clearer. That is what happens. So when we do that, then such clarity will appear within us. Okay. There was one other question. I should acknowledge the person who asked me these questions. Her name is Jayashri Chavrani. So my sister Jayashri in Nagpur, I hope she's listening. Thank you for asking me these questions. So it makes me think, it makes me share these thoughts with you, and we can engage in a discussion. So I'll speak for another maybe 5 or 10 minutes and then we'll take questions. The third question you had asked was, why are people born with such kind of misery? That's a deeper question. That is a deeper question. So why is somebody born in poverty and why is somebody born in luxury? Okay. Ask yourself this question. It seems to be so unfair, isn't it? So the way we are given to understand this is whatever our situation in life is today, right now, that situation is purely, completely dependent upon what we have done in the past, right? So, for example, if I want to achieve something, then I have to take certain steps to achieve that, isn't it? We'll take very, very simple examples. I want to pass the 12th standard exam, high school exam. So, if I want to pass the exam well, I'll have to study. Simple, isn't it? So, if I study well, then I will be able to do well on the exam and then I will get good marks. That is what will happen. So, anything and everything that happens to us, or that is our life's condition right now, is a sum total of what has happened in the past or what we have done in the past. Okay. Our situation in life, our experience of life is completely and squarely dependent upon what we have done in the past. So, therefore, how do you explain the situation of people who are born with either a silver or a golden spoon in their mouth and somebody with a plastic spoon in their mouth? How do you explain that? The only way to explain that is, before we came into this world in this body, we have been in a different body in it at a different time. And at that time, in that body, whatever we might have done, that determines where we are born and in which condition and in which body. According to the yogic sciences, the place or the family or the circumstances in which we are born, the length of our life, and the different kind of experiences we will get in this lifetime, all of that is predetermined. Okay, that is predetermined based on what we have done in the past. Okay, if we understand it in this manner, then what will we do? Whatever happens in this life, we will accept it the way it is. We will not complain. Okay, and what we will do is we will try to do our best in those circumstances. So think of this like a game of cards. Say, I don't know how many of you play bridge. I'm not a good bridge player, but I understand how they play it and so on. So in the game of bridge, we get dealt some cards. So what kind of cards will be dealt to us is not in our hands. But how well we play with the cards we have in our hand, that is up to each one of us. So the person who has relatively poor cards, but he or she plays the hand well, that person becomes actually successful in life. Okay? Not the person to whom all the aces and all the kings and queens are available. But if they play the hand poorly, then they can lose. We see that in many cases. So you will see so many people who are born in privileged families, privileged conditions, they go to the best kind of schools, but unfortunately, they are not very successful in life. Whereas some people are born in poverty, born in very ordinary circumstances, but they do very well, isn't it? So these things happen. These things do happen. If we pay close attention to life around us, if we pay close attention to our own experience, we will understand these things. So I hope what I have said so far has made sense to you. Even if it has not made sense to you, it's okay. We will ask questions and we will try to gain some more clarity on this. So, what I will do is I will ask Dr. Kamal Kant to unmute himself and say a few words. So, Kamal Kant if you can say something, would be great. I would appreciate that.
No, this is so self-explanatory. The speech you have given, uh, what there is no dearth of the need in this universe, but greeds can't be met with. So there is always plenty for the need, but not much for the greed. The human greed is, beyond limit. So this explains about the luxury and misery. I have two cars, and my neighbor has a Fortuner, which I don't have yet. So I am miserable. The other fellow on my next side of the house is not having even a scooty. So I'm not seeing at his, uh, side. I'm looking beyond. I mean, something that I'm not having this, so I feel miserable. I mean, again, the thing is, जब आवे संतोष धन, सब धन धूल समान. I mean, contentment is the most important thing. Most important thing. कबीरदास जी कहते हैं, चाह गई, चिंता गई, मनुआ बेपरवाह. ना चाह है, डिजायर है, ना चिंता है, मन बेपरवाह है, मस्ती में है. चाह गई, चिंता गई, मनुआ बेपरवाह, और जाको कछु नहीं चाहिए, सोई शहंशाह. तो शहंशाह कौन है? वो कहते हैं ना परम हंस. जब उनको लिखते हैं योगी लोगों को परम हंस. परम हंस का क्या? हंस तो मुक्त है. हंस का मतलब है आत्मा से मतलब है. मुक्त आत्मा, जीवन मुक्त है, कुछ नहीं चाहिए. मैंने देखा, एक मेरे स्पिरिचुअल गुरु हैं, कि मेरे को बहुत बढ़िया एक वो आया कॉर्डलेस फोन मेरे पास. तो मेरे पास थे, और मैंने जाके दिया, गुरुजी आप ये लगाओ अपने पास, तो आप इधर उधर कहीं जाएंगे ना अपने रूम से, थोड़ा 2 4 10 कदम आगे पीछे, तो आपकी घंटी बजेगी, आप आंसर। उन्होंने तभी मेरे सामने एक दूसरे डिसाइपल को दिया कि देखो तुम्हारे काम की चीज है, डॉक्टर साहब लाए, लो रखो इसको। मुझे उस समय तो मेच्योरिटी नहीं, तो बहुत बुरा लगा। बट देन अभी मैंने 5 साल पहले एक फ्लैट में शिफ्ट किया है। पहले मेरे पास एक बड़ी कोठी थी, तो उसमें मैं, despite availability of so many amenities, I started feeling miserable because हम दो आदमी, मैं और मेरी वाइफ, बेटा मुंबई में, तो उसको हम प्रॉपर सफाई भी नहीं रख पाते थे। मोर ओवर हमारी जो डोमेस्टिक हेल्प था, लड़का और उसकी वाइफ, तो उनके लिए वो जेल हो जाता था, बिकॉज माई सिटी मुजफ्फरनगर इज notorious as far as kidnappings and theft and all these things are concerned। तो हम उसको बंद करके नहीं जा सकते थे। Then I decided to shift to an apartment. I shifted to a 3 BHK apartment and I'm so happy here। But क्या करना पड़ा मुझे, 80% जो मेरा सामान था वहां, वो मैंने बांट दिया, दे दिया, छोड़ दिया वहीं। चाहे उसमें बहुत बड़ी लाइब्रेरी थी, चाहे कुछ भी था। एंड आई वाज सो सरप्राइज्ड कि उसमें बहुत सारा सामान तो ऐसा था जिसको मैंने शायद 10 20 बरस से भी नहीं देखा था। वो इतना बड़ा हाउस था कि कुछ आया रखा गया, कुछ आया किसी रूम में रखा गया, 10 12 रूम थे उसमें। अभी यहाँ क्या सीखा है हमने कि अगर मैं 2 जैकेट लाया तो 2 जैकेट निकाल दो, किसी को दे दो, पुअर को। तो ये सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट चीज है। नीड्स में कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, बट ग्रीड की कोई लिमिट नहीं है। सो दिस इज व्हाट आई अंडरस्टैंड विद बीइंग मिजरेबल एंड बीइंग इन लग्जरी।
Great. That was that was really fantastic. Thank you, कमल कांत जी। मेरे यहाँ पर एक प्रश्न आया है। हमारे एक भाई हैं मनीष नंदगांवकर, वो पूछते हैं, कैपिटलिज्म एंड इंडस्ट्रियलाइजेशन इज ड्राइविंग टू चेस लग्जरी, हाउ आवर एजुकेशनल सिस्टम विल हेल्प मेकिंग ए माइंडसेट to change from money to happiness? That's a very good question. Thank you, Manish, for asking this question. You see, our life's purpose, unfortunately, is to fulfill our desires and nothing more than that. That is what, unfortunately, most of us keep doing all the time. But most of us don't understand that that is not fulfillment at all. The earlier in life we realize that fulfillment of desire is not equal to fulfillment in life, the better it is for us. Okay. The trouble is, most of us don't get the right kind of education. Since you have asked me for education, I think that's a good question. Most of our education, most of our secular education or worldly education is to enable us to fulfill our desires. And as Dr. Kamalkant was saying just now, our greed, which means our desire, our desires, multiple desires, infinite desires, are really infinite. There is no limit for our greed, or there is no limit for our desires. So, fulfillment of desires is unfortunately not equal to fulfillment of life. We must have realized that, or we should have realized that, even if we pay close attention to our own experience, forget about what is happening in the world. My own experience, let me analyze my own experience and try to find out. Yes, I have undertaken all kinds of work to fulfill all kinds of desires. Have the desires been completely fulfilled? No, because once one desire gets fulfilled, then another desire is standing right behind, isn't it? Because fulfillment is not in a thing. Okay, fulfillment is not in a place, fulfillment is not in a person. Fulfillment is an experience we get from within us. Okay, so this has to be taught from day one. And how can I teach anything to anybody? Only if I have experienced it and practiced it myself. Only then I become eligible to teach anything to anybody. So In one of my previous webinars, I must have said this. Who do we learn from? Or who should I learn from? So there are three criteria for a teacher. If I want to learn from somebody, then whatever I want to learn, that person should have experience of that. So if I want to learn English, then I should go to an English teacher who has mastered English and who has experience of teaching English. Correct? Secondly, the other person who I'm going to learn from, my guru, that guru should not have any vested interest. Okay. So if I go to the guru and I tell the guru that I want to learn something from you, and the guru says, first you deposit 2 lakhs of rupees or some exorbitant amount, and only then I will teach you. Then the guru is wanting to get something in return. Okay. That's not the right kind of guru. And the third thing is the guru should have my goodwill or my benefit in his mind. So in Hindi, I can say गुरु को मेरे हित की चिंता होनी चाहिए. So गुरु मेरा हित चिंतक होना चाहिए. So if I find a person who fulfills all three criteria, then from that person I should learn. Whatever that person is capable of teaching me, I should learn. So if we keep learning like this from day one, and if we learn from a guru who can teach me that fulfillment of desires is not equal to fulfillment in life, where is this better taught than in the 15th chapter of the Gita? So if we learn the 15th chapter of the Gita, which is the essence of all of the Vedic knowledge, the entire knowledge of the Vedas. In fact, Veda itself means knowledge. Veda means knowledge. All right. That the wisdom of all the Veda is distilled in what we call as Vedanta. Vedanta is the end of the Veda as well as the essence of the Veda or the crux of the Veda. That is basically in the Upanishads. The Upanishad part of Veda is called Vedanta. Those Upanishads have been condensed and distilled into the Gita. And the essence of the Gita, the knowledge portion of the Gita, has been condensed in the 15th chapter. This is the only chapter in which only Bhagwan speaks. So the chapter starts with Shri Bhagavan Vacha, and then there are 20 verses, 20 shlok. In no other chapter, this is found to be. So in every other chapter, the chapter will either begin with Dhritarashtra Uvacha or Sanjay Uvacha or Arjuna Uvacha, and there will be dialogue within the chapter. Okay, but in this 15th chapter, there is no dialogue. It's only very, very condensed teaching of the Upanishads. So if we learn that, then we learn four things. Four misconceptions we have in our mind get clarified by learning that. Number one conception, what is the world? Because when I come in this world, when I'm born in this world, when I come out of my mother's body, my sense organs become activated automatically. And the sense organs are outward bound, so they experience the world. All right. What I assume because of that experience is this world I'm experiencing with my sense organs is real. And yes, it appears to be real, but it keeps changing all the time. Okay. So what keeps changing all the time cannot be ultimately real. But what doesn't change ever, which is unchanging, which doesn't experience any kind of change, that is the truth. And that is our essential nature. Okay. So initially the chapter discusses what is this world. Then it also says that the way we experience the world or the way we think the world is, it isn't really like that. It is completely reverse. Okay. It has neither beginning nor an end nor any kind of reality right now. It's only an appearance. Okay. It's like the appearance of a movie on a screen. So the screen is the reality and the movie is only being projected on it. But our attention doesn't go to the screen. Our attention goes to the movie that is being played on it. So this entire world is actually being played on the substratum, the screen of consciousness. That consciousness is what we are. That consciousness is what you are. Thou art that. So the main teaching of all the Vedas is Tat Tvam Asi, that you are, or you that are. See, in Sanskrit, you can move the words around and the meaning of the sentence does not change. So in Sanskrit, they will say Tat Tvam Asi, that you are. Okay, or you are that. So Tatvamasi. So if you understand this, or if we understand this, then what we will realize that we were living under a misconceived notion about the world. We had the misconceived notion that this world is real because we had assumed ourselves, or we had assumed ourselves to be the body. Okay. So therefore, the chapter also discusses what is this world? Who am I? You know, what is the jiva? I consider myself to be a jiva. I consider myself to be an individual apart from all of you, isn't it? That I consider to be a jiva, whether that is real or not. Then what is the practice? What is the spiritual practice? What is the way to live? What is the art of living? Okay. Then who is God? Ishvara. Okay. Who I consider to be Ishvara. Who is the controller or the creator of this entire universe? Who is that? We have misconceived notions about all four things. And all four misconceptions are completely cleared when we study this, when we contemplate on it, and when we meditate on it all the time. So it is called Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana. Shravana means to hear about it. Manana means trying to clarify our doubts. And Nididhyasana means remaining in that consciousness all the time, or remaining in that meditative state at all times. That is what the spiritual practice is. There are 5 specific things we need to do. I'm telling you all these things in summary because you asked me this question about education. So this is the kind of education we all need to have from the very beginning. If we have that kind of education, then we will get answers to many of our questions automatically. In fact, no, we won't get answers. The questions themselves will be dissolved. That is what happens. So the 5 things we need to do is Nirmana Moha, Jitasanga Dosha, Adhyatma Nitya, Vinivritta Kamaha, Sukha Dukkha Samyaihi. Okay, so Nirmana Moha means we should not have any attachment to. Mana means measurement. Mana in Marathi or Hindi also means pride, or the kind of respect people give you, that is called mana. And if people don't give you the respect you think you should get, then you say that मेरा अपमान हो गया. ऐसा नहीं है. Mana means measurement. Measurement means I have limited myself or measured myself in time, space, and object. Time meaning, this lifetime. I was born on a certain date. So I'm assuming that I wasn't before that, or I did not exist before that. And then the day I leave this body, that will be it. So therefore, I'm limiting myself in time. Limit myself in space meaning 5 foot 8 inch tall, 2 feet wide, 1 foot deep, this much space. And object means I weigh 65 kilograms. So I have limited myself in time, space, and object. Whether that is true or not, I have not even questioned. I have not examined. That is what happens. We should not do that because we are not that. See, these things keep changing all the time. My dimensions keep changing, my weight keeps changing, and my body also keeps changing all the time. But I don't have any experience of change. I'm the unchanging principle. I'm the same person who used to be as a child, then I became a teenager, then I became an adult, then I became an older adult, and now I am who I am. isn't it? So I don't experience any change within myself. My awareness of who I am, or just I am, that awareness has not changed even a single bit. I am the same who I was when I was a child, or when this body was a child. Same when I was a teenager, when the body was a teenager's body. So the body has come and gone. Many bodies have come and gone. The body keeps changing every moment. So I have worn infinite bodies in this lifetime, isn't it? But I have limited myself to the body. Okay, so I can easily agree that, okay, I'm not the body, I'm something else. All right. But then that something else I assume to be apart from you, an individual apart from every other individual. That is another assumption I live under, isn't it? Whether that assumption is true or not, I don't know. We'll find out. So nirmana moha, then jita sanga dosha. Jita sanga dosha means, sanga dosh means the error of attachment. Sanga means attachment and dosha means error. Jita sanga means to overcome that error. All right. Now let us examine whether attachment is real or not. We think that we are attached, but is that attachment real? It's not true, because we feel so attached to our body, so attached to our body. But are we really attached to our body? No. The childhood body went away. The teenager body went away. Do I go to the police station and complain that, Mr. Police, my childhood body has disappeared? Can you go and find it? No. I'm no longer attached to it. All right. Attachment itself is an illusion. So we are not attached to anything, but we feel we are attached to it. That is our problem. So I have told this story to some people, but not everybody would have heard it. In a village, there used to be a washerman, a dhobi. Okay. He used to collect all the dirty clothes, dirty laundry from people, and then he would load all of that dirty laundry into his SUV truck with four legs. That is called the donkey. Okay, so he would load all the dirty laundry on the top of his donkey, and then he would go to the river, and then he would wash all the clothes on the river, and then dry them on the river bank, on the rocks along the river. During this time, the donkey is tied to the tree. Okay. Then once the clothes are dried, then he would nicely fold them and then tie them up together again, bring them on top of the donkey, and then the whole party would come back to the town. He would do this day after day, day after day. One day, after reaching the river, he realized that he had forgotten the rope with which to tie the donkey. So then he was worried, because if he goes back to town to bring the rope and tie the donkey, then he would have lost half the day, and then he would not be able to finish his job. Then he would have lost one day's income. Huh? And then if he doesn't go back, but then lets the donkey around, then the donkey might run away. So then how will he go back to town with all the clothes? That was the dilemma. So he was just thinking like this, and one wise man who lived nearby, he came and saw this washerman, Dhobi. He said, "What's the problem?" So he explained this problem. He said, "No, this is very simple. I'll tell you. You go to the tree and you pretend that you are tying the donkey. You don't have the rope, but you pretend, you do the action, and you pretend as if you are tying him. But you make sure that the donkey is watching you." So the washerman is very happy. So he does it. Okay, he goes there, who goes to the tree, and he pretends as if he's tying the donkey, and then he ties it to the tree, and the donkey is watching what he's doing. Right. After that, he takes the clothes, he goes and washes, and you know, with one eye, he's always looking at the donkey, what the donkey is doing. But the donkey is cool. He's eating grass. He's around, and he doesn't go anywhere. The donkey is under the impression that he's tied. Okay, so then the washerman finishes his job, he folds his clothes, everything, and then he comes back to the donkey. And then he says to the donkey, let's go, chalo. But the donkey doesn't move. Then another problem, starting trouble. Then he goes to the wise man and he says, Maharaj, you had told me a very nice trick to keep the donkey in his place, but now he doesn't want to go home. Now what should I? Now I'm stuck again. Says, did you untie the donkey? Oh, there is no rope. See, you know that there is no rope, but the donkey doesn't know. So what you should do is you should untie the donkey. You should pretend that you are untying the donkey, but make sure that the donkey is watching you. Okay, so he unties the donkey and the donkey is watching. And then he says, let's go. And then the donkey goes. This is our life story. Okay, we feel that we are bound by this world. We are bound by things. We are bound by people. We are bound by situations. We are bound by place. We are bound by time. Desha, Kala, Vastu, Vyakti, Paristhiti. These five things we think are binding us, but they don't. If we understand that the bondage we have assumed is actually kalpanik, it is only imaginary, it is not real, then how to untie? Then some guru has to appear in our life. And the guru has to pretend that he is untying us. So the guru only unties what is not existing at all. Okay, but he still has to go through the motion of untying. Only then we realize that we were never bound in the first place. All of these things, if we understand clearly. So we learned about Nirmana Moha, Jita Sangha Dosha. Third thing is Adhyatma Nitya. Adhyatma Nitya means contemplating on the study of the self all the time. So this is exactly what we are doing right now. So this is what is called Adhyatma Nitya. So remaining in this awareness at all times is called Adhyatma Nitya. Then Vinivritta Kamaha. Vinivritta Kamaha means going beyond desires or retiring from desires. If we understand that the desires are essentially a fleeting happiness, then we will not try to spend all of our energy in trying to fulfilling all desires, because desires can never be fulfilled. So what we will do is we will make sure that there is 6 feet water in the pool. We will not try to unnecessarily spend our energy, time in digging the pool 600 feet deep or any more than 600 feet deep. So we will do everything we need to do to sustain ourselves, but we will not unnecessarily pursue all kinds of things to collect luxury. And even if by God's grace we have luxury in our life, we will only consume what we really need out of that. So even when we have many choices, we exercise only those choices that are good for us, that are needed for us, and that are necessary for us. We don't unnecessarily indulge at all. All right. That is called Vinivritta Kamaha. And then Dvandvair Vimuktaha. Dvandvair Vimuktaha Sukha Dukkha Saunyayi. What are these Dvandva? The Dvandva are of Sukha and Dukkha. Right? So we undertake actions because we want to experience Sukha, which is happiness. And we want to avoid actions that will bring us Dukkha or misery. That is how we have designed our life, is it not? So going beyond the Dvandva of Sukha and Dukkha. So the understanding is Sukha will come and Dukkha will come. So happiness will come, misery will come. Just like daylight comes, night comes. Okay. So what do we do? If there is night, then we will turn the lights on and do what we need to do. So when the situation creates a miserable experience within us, we do whatever we need to do to correct that situation. So if it is cold outside, then I wear a sweater. If it is really warm outside, then I stay in shade or I stand under a tree, or if I can afford, then I turn the air conditioning on. Whatever you can afford, you do. But don't get stuck to it. Don't get stuck to it. All right. So the second verse in the last 18 verses of the second chapter of the Gita, there Bhagavan says, Dukheshu anudvigna manah Sukheshu vigata spruha vitaraga bhaya krodha stitadhir muniruchate. So dukheshu anudvignamana. So during miserable time, anudvigna means our mind should not become udvigna, or our mind should not become agitated. Okay. Sukheshu vigata spruha means when the situation is happy, or when we are in a comfortable situation, then there should be no desire that this should continue all the time, or there should not be any spruha means craving for it or attachment to it. Okay. Okay, with God's grace, the situation is good, so I'm grateful. Okay, that's fine. So dukkha will come, sukha will also come, dukkha will go, and sukha will also go. So there was this sadhu who happened to be passing through an old kingdom, and he met the king, and the king was very worried. So the sadhu asked him, "O king, why are you so worried?" So the king said, the neighboring kingdom is trying to attack us, and my son, the prince, is not interested in taking care of himself. He is rolling in luxury. He is the king's son, isn't it? All he is interested in is, running after girls and then going for parties and picnics and all those things. That's all. So I'm very miserable. So the sadhu tells him, "O king, this shall pass." So then the sadhu goes away, and then after some time, he comes back again through the same kingdom and meets the same king and asks the king, "O king, how are things going?" He said, "By God's grace, everything is good. I had a treaty with the neighboring country, and then it's all peace and quiet. And the prince, he has understood his responsibilities. Now he's happily married. He's running the kingdom very nicely and all that. So everything is fine." Then the sadhu says, "O king, even this shall pass." So just as misery comes and goes, happiness will also come and go. So we have to be equanimous in both situations. So nirmana moha jitasanga dosha adhyatma nitya vinivritta kamaha dvandvair vimuktaha sukha dukkha saunyaye gachanti amudhaha padam avyayam tat. The one who does this, he will go to the one who is amudha. Amudha means the one who is not deluded. जो मूर्ख नहीं है, जो होशियार है, जो सीखना चाहता है, the one who is wise, गच्छन्ति अमूढ़ाः पदम अव्ययम तत्. Padam means place, avyayam means it will not be in any way, it cannot be reduced or it cannot be lessened. So what cannot be lessened? Infinite. Padam avyayam. So you will reach the infinite abode. Tat means that infinite abode you will reach if you practice all these 5 things. So that is the education we must get from the very beginning. So I really appreciate the question you have asked. I hope this was a long answer, but I hope you find it useful. Now, capitalism and industrialization, I have not really touched upon that. See, capitalism and industrialization are based upon the assumption that fulfillment of desire is equal to fulfillment in life. So any system based on this kind of assumption is going to lead to ruin and to misery. About that, there is absolutely no doubt. So capitalism and industrialization may seem to be okay for the time being, but that is not going to be the solution. In fact, you should take a look at one of the webinars I gave recently on environmental wellness. In that, you will understand how we have brought ourselves to ruin because of over industrialization. So these are the things we need to keep contemplating on and understand, learn. So I see there are some follow-up questions. I think we'll take a few questions because there are 5 more minutes. So Pooja, why don't you read some of these questions? Would that be good? And then I will answer. So can you
Yeah, I
unmute
think
yourself?
sure. So Dr. Goyal has answered a lot of questions here on the chat. So I think they are taken care of. I think Samir wants to ask a question. So
Let's
unmute.
ask Samir to unmute. So Samir, if you can unmute yourself would be great and then talk.
Yeah. My question is, um, if a fraudster loots people in India and deposits 15-20 billion dollars abroad, say in Europe or wherever, and to overcome the pap or whatever the purpose is, and he donates some few $10,000. Will Krishna accept this? Because very many ages ago, when Krishna went to visit the palace in Hastinapur, Duryodhan offered him royal delicacies, but he said that simple dal chawal of Vidur is more attractive. Similarly, he used to prefer old cooked rice from Sudama. So, what would be your answer? Thank you.
Great. As I said, if we learn about these things from the very childhood, from the very beginning, the two verses which come even before this verse I just told you in the 15th chapter, the first two verses, what do they say? They say, Urdhvamulam adhashakam ashwatham prahuravyayam chandamsi asya parnani yastam vedasa vedavet. That is the first verse. Secondly, adhascha urdhvam prasrutas tasya shakha guna pravruddha vishaya pravalaha adhascha mulanyanusantatani karmanu bandhini manushaloke. These are the first two verses in which the world is described. Okay, I won't go into the details right now, but the gist is the world appears to us not the way it is. Okay, it appears to us completely upside down. In fact, I would say the world appears to us not the way the world is, but the way we are. All right. Then in the third verse, Bhagavan says, Narupamasyeha tathopalabhyate nantona chadir nacha sampratishtha ashwatthaменam suvirudha asanga shastrena drudhena chitva. It means that narupam asya iha doesn't look the way it is. Okay. Nacha anta nacha adir nacha sampratishtha. It has neither beginning nor end nor existence. Ashwatthaменam suvirudha moolam, if you want to get rid of it, you have to cut it from the very bottom at the roots itself. Asanga shastrena drudhena chitva, which means that with the weapon of non-attachment, you have to cut the root of this tree. Okay. If we do that, then simplicity will manifest in our life every day. So even if there is a luxurious plate in front of me, I will only eat what I must eat and whatever I need to eat. So even in luxurious situations, I will live a very simple life. That is what will end up happening. So Krishna's answer to this would be that don't get lost in the world around you. The world around you doesn't really exist. It appears to be, but it is not like that. It is only an illusion. It is only an appearance. Okay. If we understand this properly, then we will not chase anything in the world. We will understand the world as an illusion, as a mirage, as only an appearance. It's not real. It's like the movie on the screen. The movie is not real. The screen is real. That we will understand. If we understand this, if we inculcate all these things in our life, and if we live our life, everyday life, in this awareness, that will lead us to fulfillment in life. So at the very end, Bhagavan says, Iti guhyatamam shastram idam uktam maya nagha etad buddhva buddhiman syat kritakrityascha bharata. So this deepest secret knowledge has been told to you by me. That's what Krishna is telling Arjuna. Once you understand this, you will get the experience of kritakrityata, means whatever needs to be done has been done. There is no desire to do anything. You will end up doing a lot of things. In fact, there is a lot of karma will happen through you, but you will not develop any karta bhav. So you will not develop the notion that I'm the one who is doing it. No, things are happening through me, but I'm not the one who is doing those things. That is the kind of attitude that will get manifested from our life. I hope and pray that such attitude will be bestowed upon all of us, and we will learn these things from the Gita as well as from the sayings and the teachings of the great masters, and through our own contemplation and nididhyasana. I wish you a wonderful Sunday evening, those in Bharat, and I wish everybody a wonderful day, Sunday, rest of the weekend, those who are in America. Namaste, and we shall meet in the next 2 weeks once again. Thank you.